Hello, everyone. My name is Shad Ayub. I am the strategy lead for Vault Study Training here at Viva. Thank you all for joining us today. It's my pleasure to introduce and host this panel with expert from our fantastic early adopter customers from both Cerevel and Novotech. So we're joined by Lindsay and Stephen from their respective companies, who I'll let introduce themselves here in a few minutes, and we'll bring them in as panelists. But first, thought I would just quickly introduce the application, just share a little bit about what we're doing here at Viva. I literally have one slide just to level set for everyone who's joining. So as we get into the conversation, give you just a perspective of what Viva is doing, what we're thinking about, and really how we're thinking about it. And then from there, I'll introduce my colleague, Kelsey, who will get into a very short demo for you, just maybe 5+ minutes or so, just to give you a little bit of context. So as we get into the conversation with both Lindsay and Stephen, you have a little bit of perspective when we talk about like the training matrix, or when we talk about impact assessments, or any of the role-based training activities. So we thought we'd give you a good foundation just to get an understanding and see a little bit of the application. So that helps aid the conversation. So we're really excited to have this group discussion. So with that, maybe just my quick slide for you all. This moves over. Just to share a little bit about what we're doing here at Viva and really why we're doing it. This is something that we're really excited about. Number one, this has been something that we've been working on behind the scenes now for a number of years. And really our vision for study training is to make sure that our customers, both sponsors and CROs, are always inspection ready, right? So this is really not only a story about compliance and inspection readiness, but this is about operational efficiencies for all the various stakeholders who are needing to be participating on a clinical trial. So this is anyone within a sponsor organization, anyone on the study team that may need to be trained, anyone from the core study team themselves, to the data management team, to the statisticians, et cetera. Of course, the CROs and the individuals that are participating at the study level at the CROs, as well as the clinical research sites themselves. So this is a holistic solution that is purpose-built for clinical training, and it is designed and intended to be a single unified experience for all the various stakeholders that you see here. This is fully connected to the clinical operations vault that you may have today. So when you think about eTMF, CTMS, being able to leverage all of the data. So when we talk about studies and countries and sites and study personnel, as well as the documents and the training material coming directly over from the TMF, as well as some of the operational data that can come over from CTMS. When you think about start and end dates when people participate on your trials, how can Vault automatically then distribute training to those individuals based on their study participation, and as well as their responsibilities based on the delegation log. So a lot of exciting things. But with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Kelsey, who will introduce herself and get into a short demo for you.
So we're going to begin the demo today, logged into Vault Study Training as a study manager. And we're going to begin on the study record, where I can see clinical master data such as study, country, site, and personnel information that originated in Vault Clinical is now flowing into study training via the productized connection. So the use of this connection allows this master data to be managed in a single location, and it eliminates the need for a complex integration. I'd like to note, as new studies, countries, sites, and personnel are added or removed in the clinical vault, this information in study training will update automatically, providing a unified platform with connected data. So now that our clinical master data has populated in study training, let's go ahead and initiate the auto assignment process by opening up the Training Matrix Builder. The Training Matrix Builder is a powerful tool in Vault Study Training. It helps you to organize your training plan and communicate to Vault who should receive what training, so that Vault can auto assign accordingly. You'll see that the learner roles appear along the top of the matrix, and then training content appears on the left-hand side. You can then select which trainings apply to which learner role. So then anytime someone's tagged with that learner role, all of the associated trainings will automatically be assigned to them. Assigned trainings can leverage different file types and include a specific order of completion and any required recurrence. Country-specific training can be assigned to learners as well. So for example, you can see here that we have a gray Japan tag. That indicates that Vault will only assign this training to a learner associated with Japan. If you need to assign additional trainings to a learner that go beyond their standard role, you can direct assign a training on an individual basis as well. It's also very simple and convenient to add and assign a new training right from this location. With the single click of a button, you can select which trainings you wish to add, as well as the study roles that the training applies to. And then Vault will go ahead and distribute accordingly. This will send them an email and a Vault notification so that they're aware that a new training needs to be completed. Vault's Training Matrix Builder is an industry-changing tool because it eliminates cumbersome, time-consuming processes, because training can be built and assigned and sent to learners all from a single screen. So now that we've reviewed the training plan setup, let's go ahead and log in as a learner to view the end user experience. So today, I'm going to be logged in hypothetically as a CRA, but please note that whether it be for internal users at a sponsor or CRO, or whether your organization decides to externalize to partners or even site personnel, this same view and functionality is going to apply to any of those end users. So as you can see here, there's a reduced number of tabs at the top, providing more streamlined navigation. There's timeliness metrics on the left-hand side to assist the user in better understanding what they need to focus on. Trainings will appear to learners in these box sections that contain group training requirements, which declutters the screen and it allows the learner to easily digest the information. I'm going to go ahead and open up one of these trainings. And in doing so, the learner is going to see the listed requirements, the due dates, the associated time estimates, and also the overall completion percentage at the top, enabling them to gauge their own progress and efficiently manage their time. Training requirements can contain documents that are connected directly from your eTMF, as Shad had mentioned previously. So I could go ahead and open up the protocol overview. And so in doing so, we can see the current protocol that's filed in my eTMF flowing over from Vault Clinical via the same connection I mentioned earlier. Shad also mentioned an impact assessment. An impact assessment can be sent to designated users when these types of documents get up-versioned or revised in the TMF for the training admin to then make a decision as to whether or not that updated document should be included in the training. We can see that this also happens to include a quiz, which I was able to create natively within Vault using the quiz builder that leverages simple point-and-click configuration. The use of quizzes can enhance the impact of training by ensuring learners retain key trial information or very technical concepts. When I open up a different training requirement, the compound overview, I can see that a training can contain 2 training materials. This one has a video and then also a PDF document. After reviewing both, I can click complete, indicate that I've read and understood, and then Vault will collect my Part 11 compliant e-signature and file it in the studies training record. If you need to have a learner complete an external training, such as one located within a separate website outside of Vault, you could include a link to that website so that the learner can access the training and then upload a proof of completion upon returning to Vault. A verification task can also be triggered for an admin to review that proof of completion to ensure it meets requirements. We can see that Vault also supports SCORM packages, which is one of the industry standards for learning. If you have a GCP SCORM file, for example, that you use throughout your organization, that file can natively open in Vault for the learner to complete. If a learner completes a training such as this that's required for multiple studies, the learner would only need to complete the training once, but the completion would be tracked across multiple study records. Vault Study Training also offers the option to organize a classroom session to accommodate live in-person or virtual training. You can provide in-person meeting location details or a link to the meeting if it's being held virtually. You also have the option to provide any attachments for the attendees to review. Logging back in as the study manager, if I'm responsible for managing the attendance record, I can easily track attendance right within Vault Study Training. I can also upload a certificate of completion on behalf of these learners that attended the meeting, or instead of managing multiple certificates of completion, I could log a facilitated training request that will indicate which learners attended the meeting, and it will satisfy designated training requirements in study training. So after creating and assigning these trainings as a study manager, I can effortlessly track the real-time training status of my study teams from a global overview, even down to the individual site level, using Vault's reports and dashboards functionality. This visibility enables managers to confidently assess the completeness of training records, gauge their inspection readiness, and identify trends in critical training areas. So in the face of increasingly complex clinical trials, this industry needs a streamlined and integrated training solution that can adapt to the evolving demands of today's studies. Vault Study Training is the purpose-built answer to this challenge. It empowers you to simplify your training processes, ensure inspection readiness, and elevate compliance across your study teams. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Shad so that we can continue our discussion.
Thank you, Kelsey. All right. So a few questions came in about the demo. So maybe I'll just quickly answer these ones live. So the first question was around, is this an example of an out-of-the-box configuration, or is it based on customization? So everything that Kelsey just showed you right now is essentially out of the box. So this is a very mature, and there was a question around Vault training and the quality suite as well. So maybe I'll try to tackle these at the same time. So study training, while relatively new, is really leveraging the foundation of our Vault training application, coming from the quality suite. We essentially leverage all of the core LMS and GXP capabilities of our training platform and used it to really build a new purpose-built solution application for the clinical use case. So this is in fact a standalone Vault. So it is a study training Vault. And really the only prerequisite is having eTMF. There was another question around, do sites need Site Doc or Site Connect or Site Vault? The answer is no. So your sites can log directly into this environment as you distribute the training to them. So whether it's your PIs, your sub-Is, your coordinators, your pharmacist, et cetera, the entire site team can log directly in and complete their training. We also have hybrid models where you can have a live, of course, you can have your SIVs or live investigator meetings, et cetera. All of that is supported. So what you saw is all standard out-of-the-box capabilities. And of course, during an implementation, we work with our customers individually to get an understanding of what your business processes are or your needs are. So with that, I'd like to bring up our panelist. So Lindsay, if you don't mind hopping on and quickly introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about yourself and about Novotech. And we'd love to hear from you.
Great, thanks, Shad. So yeah, just a little bit about me. My name is Lindsay, and I have been in the clinical trials industry for over 10 years, held various different roles throughout that period, and more recently actually was the program manager for our Viva implementation. So at the moment, Novotech is currently using Viva Clinical, which is CTMS and eTMF, including the SSU module. And we're also using study training and also using Viva Safety, as well as just starting to look at Viva CDMS as well. So lots of vaults happening at Novotech. Just a little bit about Novotech. So we've got experience in over 5,000 clinical studies, all through phase 1 to 4, including bioequivalence studies. We've got over 3,000 staff globally across 34 office locations. So at the moment, we are serving as a partner to sponsors that want to conduct studies in the Asia Pacific region, US and Europe. Yeah, expanding at the moment. Thanks, Shad.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. All right. And then Stephen, let's bring you up and you can share a little bit about yourself and Cerevel.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Stephen Van Arken. I'm a senior clinical oversight lead at Cerevel. I've been with the company for about 4 years now, and I am our ETMF vault owner, also our study training vault owner. But we also have the RIM vault, the Regulatory Information Management vault, as well as a couple modules in our Viva Quality vault. So I think that's an important piece for Cerevel. We already used some of that LMS Viva training functionality previously, and I think that gave us a really big leg up when we were, looking at training solutions. As for Cerevel, we are a smaller, well, maybe a little bit larger now, startup biotech. Still everything in the clinic, nothing marketed yet, but we do have plenty of studies going on, plenty of work to pass around. You can see 20 study countries, nearing that 1,000 study sites mark. So a lot of work, but we do work with several CRO partners, FSP partners as well, that execute some of the day-to-day work on our behalf. So plenty of folks to make sure that they are being trained adequately and on time. So happy to be a part of this panel and kind of share my experience with y'all.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, so with that, we'll kind of transition into the discussion. This is pretty consistent as we talk to customers. Like I said, we have a very unique position here at Viva, talking to the industry in the way that we're able to, and we start to hear very common themes from our customers. Everything from paper, tons of Excel out in the market, or in the industry today with our customers. Even those customers who are using CRO partners or who are using validated solutions, there always seems to be a component of Excel in every organization. And so, these are the kinds of things that we're really trying to bring into a validated solution. You saw Kelsey when she was doing the training matrix. We really got that idea from our customers as we started to see their Excel sheets and how they were tracking their trainings. So maybe just coming over to the first question for you, Lindsay. Maybe I'll start with you. Maybe you can just share a little bit about what you guys were previously using to manage and assign training. Obviously, being with CRO, you had multiple sponsors, multiple projects, global operations, et cetera. Just curious about what that experience was like for your teams.
Sure. So actually, originally, when I first started Novotech almost 9 years ago, we were actually using, it was similar, we were using paper-based forms, tracking that in Excel as well. And then we started using our CTMS, Oracle CTMS system to start tracking that training, which was actually a big efficiency gain for us, but it was still sort of just effectively Excel on platform. So we didn't really have any ability to report on overdue training. Maintenance was still fairly time consuming. We were relying on manual notification to the team in order to update their training. So we still had this disjointed system where there was no connection between where the document was being stored and the system itself. So I think ultimately, there was a higher chance of team members actually completing the training, but then just missing documenting it because we were, relying on email to notify team members. So definitely some compliance issues related to that, and then also just more limited visibility for our managers as well. So yeah, I think just we were previously working in very siloed systems, and then looking as we were shifting to Viva Clinical to use the workflows within the platform to help us with these issues.
Yeah, that's interesting. Steve, how about you? What was your perspective and what were you guys doing previously?
Yeah, well, I think we actually had a gap there for tracking our clinical, like our project specific training. We had our corporate training, policies, and SOPs taken care of pretty well in the Viva Quality Vault, but we knew that we needed a better way of doing our project training. We tried doing read and understood in Viva Quality, leveraging that training application, but it was very intensive on our training team as well as our clinical team to try and get, the original training material, any updates to training material, to get folks to go in and do the updated training or alert our training team when it needed to be updated. So there was a lot of administrative hours there, and it wasn't good time well spent, I don't think. And so we knew that we needed to do a little bit better. We looked at Excel tracking as well. We knew that was something that could be done feasibly, but we're living in a new technological age now. We wanted something a little bit better. And I remember after implementing our RIM to eTMF connector, I was talking to our Quality Vault owner and asking, why can't we connect our TMF documents to quality and just, make that training happen a little bit more automatically. And then when we were assessing solutions, we saw study training and brought that solution that we had hoped for, I guess, early on. So.
Yeah, you brought up a couple of interesting things. You mentioned your quality owner. So I think many in this audience may have heard from his colleague Grace De Francesca, who is in fact their Vault quality and Vault training business owner. She actually presented at our North America R&D Summit in September, so just I guess a few weeks ago. So you may have heard the name or recognize the Cerevel name or Grace's name, and she presented on really what the motive was. But Stephen, I'm curious from your perspective, as the ClinOps business owner, can you share a little bit about the decision-making process as to why you selected Vault Study Training when you already had a training solution?
Yeah, we this wasn't the first time we put together a business case for some, I'll call it an innovative solution. So we knew what we were doing already, luckily, but we looked at some of the opportunity cost, I guess, if we didn't shore up our project training. So we looked at, what a 483 could cost, assessed that being could at a minimum fairly expensive, at a maximum very, very expensive. And then we also looked at, like I said, the administrative hours that it took to manage the original process, and we tried to we actually tried to break those hours up into 15-minute increments and kind of break up each task, calculate what each person was doing in 15-minute increments, and come up with a good idea of hours spent doing those tasks, and related that back to to money at the end of the day, how much time we're spending folks to spend on these tasks. Actually, what the business case revolved around is, are we going to be able to drive efficiency with a new solution? And is it going to give us time back in our day that we can, focus on other tasks because we have something that can integrate with what we already have? We don't have to be spending hours, downloading and re-uploading and sending things through workflows again, just to get to the end goal that we desired.
Yeah, and then you brought up the business case. So actually, and that's a great segue to Lindsay. Maybe I know you guys had to put together a business case as well. Can you just share a little bit about what the selection process looked like for you and the motive for selecting study training, as well as maybe that business case that I knew you had to put together?
Yeah, sure. So I think when we were evaluating this, we were already moving to Viva Clinical at the time, and we were actually already using, we had just migrated to using Viva eTMF, and we were in the process of doing our implementation for Vault Clinical. So there was a gap already moving from our previous CTMS to our, to Viva Clinical. So we really had to weigh up the cost inefficiency if we were to move back to our previous, paper signatures and Excel, which is really just not the direction that we were wanting to go in. We also had to think about how much it was going to cost if we were to build a custom solution in Viva. So that was also an option that we had considered, which obviously there's costs involved in that, as well as, potential risk with any productized enhancements that come along with the platform that maybe won't work along with that, that custom function. So we really wanted to try and utilize a Viva product rather than developing something ourselves. And yeah, we also looked at where the opportunity was for some of the other issues that we were facing. So we built in the costs for what we would save managing site study training as well, which is something we're looking to implement in the next year. And yeah, there were some other solutions that I think Viva was able to offer for things like SOP training, Viva clinical system training, some other struggles that we were having, where we saw a lot of opportunity there as well.
Yeah. So maybe Lindsay, just a quick follow-up question. So I guess I'm curious, you brought up the sites, can you just share a little bit about maybe what that looks like and how you would anticipate improving how you train sites, maybe how CRAs engage with the site staff in a hybrid model?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think ultimately it does take a lot of time for us to effectively track the training at a site level. At the moment, generally it's paper. It's mostly paper. And kind of there could be multiple different training logs that are kind of scattered, across different files at the site and things like that. So I think we saw an opportunity to really try and utilize this to streamline that process, make it easier for the sites. Everyone's using their mobiles these days, and I think people are becoming much more familiar with tech. It's easier in some ways for something as simple as this to manage. So I think, we definitely see the opportunity to getting sites to just easily view the document, and then at the same time being able to track their training. And then on our side, also being able to reconcile that. And Shad, you also mentioned you guys were looking at also some delegation log functionality, which I know Novotech's really excited about. So yes, that I think getting all of that to work together, and just streamline and help us maintain compliance as well, or help the site maintain compliance, is really important.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Stephen, maybe coming to you on a similar question. I know you talked about maybe a longer term strategy. Now you're a sponsor who's outsourcing FSP and everything in between. So I'm curious from your perspective, how does a rollout to sites, if and when that's applicable to Cerevel? I'm curious about what that strategy looks like for you as a sponsor, potentially wanting to reach out to the sites and train them yourself.
Yeah, I think for us that's probably a couple years down the road, but we're definitely already thinking about it. We've got this solution, we know that the functionality is there, and so as we're making decisions around study training, our processes internally, we're gearing up for that, right? We're not just letting that functionality kind of fly under the radar. We know that we want to use it, and so I think we're putting the building blocks in place right now, just so we can kind of jump off later on. But I think that's a little bit further down the road. We're taking it bite size right now because we have a smaller team, I think, kind of managing this process. There's only 3 of us at Cerevel, so we want to make sure that we're not doing too much at once. We're going to take care of the internal project teams first. We'll move it to CROs probably sometime next year, and then we'll start looking at sites, making sure that we have or bring the sites in a little bit later. Luckily, we kind of outsource some of that work to our CRO partners right now. So we do rely on them to ensure that the sites are managed and trained. So we have a contingency, I guess, in place for now.
Yep.
But definitely something that we're evaluating and keeping in mind for sure.
Yeah, and I think that timeline that you just laid out is pretty consistent with what we've been hearing from our sponsor customers, which is, let us take care of our internal needs first. Potentially bring in some of the CRO partners that are already working in the ClinOps vaults, and then maybe a year, 2 years down the road, start to think towards sites. So yeah, I appreciate that perspective. Maybe Lindsay, I'll come back to you on a question around CROs working in sponsor environments. How, as a CRO, you use Vault Clinical, you have study training, you have a number of applications with Viva. I'm curious, are you hearing from sponsor customers the request to work in their environment? Is there a preference to work in your clinical operations vault? Can you just share from a CRO's perspective what your thoughts are on the market in terms of what sponsors are asking you for? Excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chad. So we often get requests, obviously, to work in other systems. So it's definitely not uncommon for us. And we do often have teams that are, using Viva actually. So we sometimes are using, one of the sponsors, Viva eTMF, or we have actually seen some Viva Clinical, some CTMS as well. So yeah, we're definitely, that's something that we do quite frequently. I think preference obviously for us is to work within our own systems, because they are obviously generally a lot of the times we're following our SOPs. And so, when you do the implementation, we kind of build the platform to function within our processes. So obviously it's, and then again, it's, our teams are trained and they have a lot of experience using our system. So just, in terms of efficiency and things like that, I think hopefully we will get to a point where it's a lot easier to transfer data, because I think ultimately that's what everyone's really interested in, right? Whatever system you're using, you just want to get the data out of the system. But yeah, we are flexible.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for that perspective. It's always, we hear it from both sides, from sponsors and from CRO. So really appreciate that perspective. Stephen, maybe coming to you, maybe just asking you from a sponsor perspective, why was it important for you to implement a scalable and validated solution? And really, I know you touched a little bit about how you might be working with CROs and sites in the future, but just, sharing that scalability, especially as your organization continues to grow, and it has grown in the last 12 months.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, we're definitely, I think, on the smaller side in the pharma landscape. Definitely not the smallest, but smaller. Only 3 of us are managing this process, so we needed something that we could use now, but wasn't going to be outdated, or we didn't need to fear that something was to come along and usurp what we've already done. We work with Viva and several other vaults, so we know that there's 3 releases every year. There's always new functionality coming out. They're listening to the customer. So we had maybe a personal bias on my part to look at Viva first, but we knew that needing something that scaled with our growth was of vital importance when we were putting that business case together. Because, like I said, we didn't want to be looking back a couple years from now and say we need something new because this just isn't working anymore. And we have a good amount of trust in Viva solutions already. So the scalability was definitely a massive factor for us.
Yeah, well, thank you for that trust and thank you for that partnership. Lindsay, maybe a question for you around the implementation. I know obviously you guys are in production now, but can you maybe just share a little bit about some of the lessons from the implementation itself that might be helpful for those companies that are considering study training?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for us, it was really important to think about, because we were also using Viva Clinical and we were really interested in the connector as well. So one thing to really keep in mind is any of the downstream impacts from the data flowing from Clinical Vault into study training. So initially we had a bit of an issue with our study team roles. They weren't, the requirements in Clinical Vault were different than our requirements in study training. So just kind of aligning that early on is really helpful. And I think for us as well, we really wanted to make sure that we had the correct process outlined really clearly, how we were going to set up the training matrix, so that we could give really clear guidance to our end users and have that happening consistently, because it's actually being managed by each project team. So we definitely wanted to see consistency there. And I think also, a clear plan for managing user access and training requirements. So because we're relying on the system to document training, and the purpose of it is to be documenting that real time, we also wanted to make sure that we didn't have any delays in getting people access to the system. And actually for our learners, we had, because it's so limited in terms of functionality, we actually took the position of, we're not requiring any mandatory training, just providing a QRG, because ultimately they just need to, put in a date confirming they've read. So that was another way that we were able to get people in the system faster. And then also, I think one of the other things to consider is we had to decide whether we were going to migrate our previous training records from our CTMS platform into Viva Clinical, into Viva Study Training. So yeah, I think doing that assessment and making sure, it's clear whether there's going to be historical records or if you're going to start from scratch.
Yeah, super helpful. Stephen, I saw you shaking your head a few times, nodding. Maybe any lessons learned from you during your implementation from a smaller sponsor perspective?
Yeah, I think Lindsay really hit on one of the main points, that data flow for the connector is super important to make sure that you've got a understanding of and so good processes around how you're managing that data. It was something that we didn't have, and it really made us think about how we needed to manage some of that reference data going forward. So that did take a little bit of time early on, but I think we're in a good place now, or definitely a better place than we were. So that was one thing. One thing that we did at Cerevel was we only chose one study to pilot this study train with off the bat, right? We knew that when we implemented, or when we did go live, we wanted to do one study with, I think it was like 15 to 20 users from the Cerevel side, just to make sure that all the training, was going out correctly, all the data was coming in from the ETMF correctly. And I think overall that was a major success for us. That study is chugging along. We haven't had any issues from our users on that study yet, so we're thankful for that. I think relatively a very smooth implementation on our side. I think a lot of that came with some experience from myself and my quality admin Grace. We've implemented a few other systems, so we definitely took some lessons learned from those implementations as well. Lastly, I think having some governance around the connector is something that we found really beneficial at Cerevel. I do it with our RIM vault owner. I've got a governance meeting, a connector governance meeting with her. And I do it with our quality vault owner too, that connector governance meeting, and it's once a month, just to make sure we go through any issues with the connector, make sure that all that data is flowing correctly. If there's any hiccups, we can troubleshoot it there. And so that governance has actually helped us a lot, because we're not waiting for a lot of messages to come through and say that this person's not here, this training assignment's not going out. We're handling things pretty contemporaneously, and it's something I would suggest any other sponsor organizations or any clients, I guess, of with study training would consider. I think it's been a big help for us.
Yeah, and maybe my final question for you both before we move over to the audience Q&A is maybe, Lindsay, just now that you're in production, it's been a little while now that you've been in production, just maybe post go live, just feedback, experiences, and maybe what's next for your organization in terms of the rollout. I know you talked a little bit about sites, maybe by next year. So just maybe final thoughts on post go live now that you've had a chance to use it for a little while.
Yeah, I think people are really most excited about the connector, right? So all of that data flow happening, the automatic transfer of documents from the TMF over to study training. We have had a few hiccups just in terms of, obviously, we were early adopters, so just having to work through a couple of things, which has made it a little bit challenging, I think, for some of our end users. So just really, I think one of the key things for us is just really making sure that our training is really clear to avoid, because a lot of times what ends up happening is there's an end user error rather than a system issue. So just making sure that our training is really clear. We've had to do a few iterations of that once we've gone live. But yeah, I think definitely see some efficiencies already. And as I said, people are really liking the connector. We are looking to hopefully expand to sites next year. So that's not something we've actually rolled out yet, but is on our roadmap for next year. We're also hoping to expand to non-protocol training. So I think I mentioned it before, but using it for SOPs, and potentially some system training. And I think there is something coming in the roadmap that we're really excited about that is going to allow us to potentially use Vault study training to host Viva clinical training, and then hopefully automate access, because that's another pain point for us, is just managing our user access, both internal and external users. So yeah, I think trying to take advantage of whatever new automation is coming up in the roadmap as well.
Yeah, Lindsay's referring to a new feature. With our early adopters, we work, really, really close with them, and we share some of the upcoming features and capabilities. So she's referring to a feature that's coming out, I'll say, relatively soon, where we're going to take the training matrix that Kelsey demoed earlier and really take it to the next level in terms of automation. We heard pretty loud and clear from our customers that user experience can be improved upon, and that there's a lot of similarities between the various studies. So why do the study teams need to recreate this every single time from scratch? So really getting you to a point where it's already 80+% built, so that your study teams can then come in and fine tune the training matrix that's applicable for their respective study, right? Add a few things, remove a few things, etc., to fine tune it for your studies. So yeah, so thank you both for that discussion.